Now that the Oscars are all over, everything, everywhere, all at once, sweep the Oscars with 7 Oscar wins. And so today we're going to be jumping into it like we promised back in our Watch This episode months ago. Thank our guest today for bringing it back. Let's just dive right in. Sean Marcus, go ahead and introduce our guest that you brought on for us today, man.
So this guy, Rick Walters, actually, the three of us have worked on projects together.
Yeah,
and I believe that's where we all three of us first met. So
that's right.
I was like, you know what?
Wow,
this
Austin.
guy.
Yeah, man.
I just had a connection. Holy crap.
You didn't make the connection? I worked on Enmity Gauge. I worked on Graveyard Shift.
Movie I ever wrote.
Yeah, man.
Holy crap. Wow, that was a long, long time ago.
Yeah, but most of the time we all worked like remote for the most part, way back then even.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I don't know if
we swept with Graveyard Shift too, didn't we?
Oh, hold on.
Where'd he go?
Look.
I don't know.
Oh, you got it.
I got it, man. I got my best sound design award for the Graveyard Shift.
John Marcus. So Graveyard Shift was the very first 48-hour 4 challenge, and our team entered in the Seattle one, and we killed it. We got it.
I believe I've seen that one. Yeah.
It's fun. Yeah. It was a fun little short one.
I got to play an asshole. It was a typecasting situation.
I was gonna say, you just acted like yourself or what, man?
Yeah. It was real easy.
Yeah, when Rick said he wanted to do this movie, I'm like,
I have so much to talk about.
Yeah. I was like, no, just kidding. I was like, man, this is going to be a daunting episode to jump back in because I had to watch the movie again. And but honestly, the second time watching it made so much more sense to me.
Try the third time.
I just enjoyed it a whole lot more.
Well, Austin, tell people real quick what the movie's about.
You're going to make me tell what it's about?
I'll give you guys a recap.
There you go.
All right.
So first of all, this movie is an absurdist dark comedy. So it's not your average film, but what it does is it follows a family, particularly our protagonist is the mom, played by Michelle Yeoh, masterfully, who is doing basically laundry and taxes at the beginning of the movie with her husband, who she's no longer has any chemistry with, and with her daughter, who is a closeted homosexual who she's ashamed of, basically. There's a lot of different things going on. And in the first act, you learn all of these things quickly and how that happens. And throughout the movie, all of them are forced to reconcile with these issues they have over multiple dimensions. And it comes all to a head at the end in a perfect little bow, and it's the most overwhelming. I watched another guy talking about it. He's like, it's like drinking from a fire hose because the movie is just coming at you like nonstop for 2 hours and 15 minutes. It's the greatest science fiction I've seen. I'm going to say this. This sounds like hyperbole, but it's the greatest science fiction movie I've ever seen.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you, though, that it is probably some of the best sci-fi writing of almost all time.
I think it was like a cool, refreshing new movie. Tons of different layers coming at you, like you said, especially once you get towards the end and it's just a bombardment. But there's also like so much depth going on in this movie, just through like emotional character changes and, things that we should probably all learn about ourselves. So I think there's a message to take away from the entire thing.
Many, yeah. As a filmmaker myself, I think filmmaking is one of the highest art forms there is, or one of the greatest story conduits there is, because there's so many different mediums within the medium in order to tell a story with. And in this film, particularly, the writing, the story, and everything culminates with multiple catharsis. Generally, you write a story, there's a protagonist. That protagonist has a decision or some kind of obstacle they have to cross, and by the end, they have a reversal and a catharsis. You relate to that. And that's how screenwriting works. But simultaneously, there's 3 or 4 or 5 different stories working here that pay off like at the end of the second act into the third act, that are all emotional catharsis. So like I watching it the second time, I cried. I was emotionally just welled up, and it got me. There were some really good moments.
There's nothing wrong with that, man. The second time I watched it here, just watching everything come together at the end, and the mother and daughter kind of actually reconnecting, and her like accepting her for who she is and accepting those moments, man. Tearing up. I was like, man, I can't look like a crying mess before I get on the show. But guys cry too in movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Waymond in this story, like coming from an actor's perspective, first of all, what a dream role to have for anybody. The amount of range he had to have in order to pull off all these different dimensional iterations of himself.
Talking about Huy Quan, who won Best Supporting Actor.
Playing this badass kind of like business exec, and then smash cut to, wailing incessantly, please, why can't we stop fighting? Can we just be kind? Everything he says means something.
And he has to switch like that back and forth.
Yeah. And the cut really does a good job of showing the contrast of the characters. Even when he's doing it in scene on camera, he's going from alpha Waymond back to, pitiful Waymond. And it's very, very well done.
Yeah. The crazy thing about him is he was pretty much retired. He hired an acting coach to dive straight back in. And obviously it paid off. Like you said, man, like he worked really hard. He did an excellent performance. And then on top of that, so well that he won an Oscar for it. So good on him, man. It was exciting to see him just come back and then kill it, because I wouldn't expect to see that from really any actor that's still acting, or has a little bit of a break.
The way that they wrote this story is so powerful. And, I'm sure we'll discuss this as we go on, but the competition that it won in each respective category against, we're talking about 10-pole blockbuster size films with huge budgets, with like steeped with prestige. They're prestige pieces, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And wasn't this like their second movie that they had written together, or first movie?
Have you seen their first movie?
No, I'm sure it's bad.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So yeah, it's absurdist. We should break this down even more too, the types of different comedy that there are. The first one was also an absurdist comedy. It was called Swiss Army Man.
Oh, that was them?
Yes.
They did Swiss Army Man?
Yes.
I love that movie.
Yes. And it's ridiculous. And I mean, it's like he's powering himself to get across the ocean with farts. You know what I mean? It's like, what the heck am I watching right now? And it happens in a way that it just works for some reason.
I watched that movie on a plane, and my wife Stacy was sitting next to me, and I got my headphones on, I'm cracking up. And she's like, what are you watching? Maybe I'll watch it. I'm like, you're going to hate it.
They go out there with their stuff then, man.
Like, I can't even imagine how much they had to put into writing this, because the one feature film that I've written about time travel, it is so much. Okay, you got to analyze every single point. Like, okay, does this match up in the timeline? And they've got multiverses to keep track of. So I can't even imagine how many whiteboards they had in their office trying to keep track of all these stories.
But then on top of that, like when you notice and you look in the backgrounds of stuff, they have things that connect each universe, like the cat pictures in the background. And then there's like some weird, in one of the multiverse pictures, there's like some cat lady, or she is a cat. And
I noticed how every time there was a multiverse thing going on, there was a mirror in the frame.
Yeah. And it's a circle mirror.
Yeah, circle mirror too.
There's so many circles
several times throughout the film, including the time when we saw Alpha Waymond in the security camera. Do you guys remember that?
Oh, is it? You talk about when he's like just jumping over everything,
like
in the laundry room
through the place, And meanwhile, Evelyn is like unaware. That's like before she had her red pill moment.
Man, I loved like the whole beginning of this movie, like especially in the laundry room, because you can just see the stress in her life as she's going. She's trying to control everything, but everything's a little bit chaotic around her. But it's also just chaotic because I kind of perceived it as she's making her own life chaotic. So they're visualizing her stress levels. I need this to work. Hey, I need more business coming in. I'm mad at my husband for who knows what, just because my life isn't working out.
Does any husband ever know the reason the wife is mad at him?
Right? I loved that whole thing. I thought it set it up really well. And
I gotta like tag on to the first act, because the first act, like screenwriting wise, is how has you set up how the universe works, literally, and the multiple universes and how they work. And at the end of it, you said it there. It's like how everything around her is chaotic, literally, because at the end of the first act, it says that, there's this big crescendo and music, and it says everything on the screen. After we've just seen, everything all at once. It's like this mundacity of all of those things in this particular universe are mirrored in every other universe in one way or another. So you either see like a parallel or a direct opposite or a conflict or something like that in each one of these characters. So they all make sense because they did such a good job of setting up the characters, including Evelyn in the beginning. But man, we saw how Gong Gong works. We saw how Wayman works as a husband and a father, and completely loving dude. He's doing kindness, isn't he, throughout the entire film?
Entire time.
And he starts in the beginning, can we all just be kind? And he does that to everyone, including to Becky, the girlfriend.
Yeah.
From the very beginning.
Which is a great contrast, like between the two characters there. You have one that's like kind of miserable and the other guy who's like just trying to make everything work and everybody happy. Like if we just work together with this, we could all be doing good,
I wanted to get back to what you guys were talking about, the first act, and watching it the second and third time. One of the funniest parts that probably went unnoticed was when Jamie Lee Curtis at the beginning, she picks up a receipt. She circles it in black, representing the black hole. She's circling it, which represents like everything basically. And she's like, can you explain this? Like, how do you explain everything in a little sit down meeting with the IRS?
They threw a lot of meta in there too. They even kind of like joke about the Wachowski sisters, and they added some Matrix nods in here, Ratatouille, Raccacoonie, like that whole thing. Like there's a lot of meta stuff in there. And I think that is another type of meta, like they put in their writing, like adding thematic stuff throughout, like the black circle and the bagel, everything, like how it works. I think it should be that way. That's like really good screenwriting. And hat off to Dan for being able to put only things in the scene that support the overall theme. And then by building it like they did, by having like Alpha Wayman, Pitiful Wayman, business slick Wayman, like all of these characters, the actors had just a place to go and drop into. I don't think I've seen that done that way. Like even the Wachowskis weren't that deep and layered. Christopher Nolan wasn't even that deep and layered. And then they just kind of took a piss on it by making it absurdist.
They added so much humor. Speaking of Wayman, in the scene where she gets kicked in the face and she knocks over somebody in the movie theater sitting next to her, you've got her husband Wayman here, and then the guy she knocks into played Wayman on Workaholics. So she was surrounded by Waymans.
Oh, I didn't even know that, dude.
And it made me wonder, like, what about the people behind them? Have they ever played people named Wayman? Because if so, genius.
Right.
Another thing I saw when there was the scene between Juju Tupaki,
Jobu Tukaki or something.
And it's like one of these things where she's basically giving the rundown to Evelyn, she's backing her up to all these different dimensions. And at one point, her hand starts materializing all of these different things, and one of them, for like one frame, is an Oscar.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, and you see it,
really?
And it flashes an Oscar. And like I went back and I was trying to pause it right on it. But if you guys go watch it, it's like right at 128, 129-ish.
Yeah,
she's like backing Evelyn down, and her hand is like a bunch of stuff's going through it. And one of them is an Oscar. I thought, man, they had Oscar buzz while they were finishing this thing. The editor of this thing put that in there and won himself an Oscar with it.
Did Michelle win anything Oscars wise for Crazy Rich Asian?
No. This is the
first time ever. Yeah,
first time ever an Asian woman has won Best Actress in the Oscars.
I think that goes the same for Best Supporting Actor, the first Asian actor.
Oh, maybe, yeah. Breaking new grounds, man. Data coming through.
I'm just curious. Do each of you, and I could talk about this for an entire 3-hour video, so my short answer is yes. Do you guys believe in multiverses?
I'm going to say no. I mean, I think there might be other like universes out there, but I don't think necessarily another one of me. but other maybe beings or people or whatever kind of species is on another universe. I think that could be a possibility. But
So you believe in Santa, but you don't believe in multiverses. All right, Rick.
Well, I don't think multiverse is like how we're seeing it now in the whole Marvel craze, and even in this one. But I do think that reality is comprised of things that can be measured mathematically. And if there is an infinite reality, then it kind of makes sense that it's going to repeat itself. Patterns repeat themselves. Like you look at fractals and all that stuff. So yes, in that sense, I think there might be a multiverse. There might be something else that's the same set of numbers as we are, somewhere far down the line. Will we be able to like catch each other wearing the same clothes or dating the same person or, having like little quirks in common? I doubt it. The fact that there might be a intergalactic like doppelganger out there somewhere, interdimensional doppelganger out there, doesn't make sense to me.
I would say the math and the science points to more and more that there has to be multiverses. So with the fact that electrons exist and don't exist at the same time, but in alternate multiverses, I feel like there has to be other versions of me making the same stupid mistakes.
That would be interesting, like Wayman at one point when he first confronted Evelyn, Alpha Wayman, he said, "Don't worry, this is burner universe." So he like jumps into himself, into that universe and wastes himself because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because they're all about stopping Jobu in order to, like that was kind of deep, I thought also. But
that brings up a question that I had is at the end of the movie, did they return to the original multiverse, or when she died in that one scene and comes back, did that fracture off and they're in a different one that's almost identical?
Yeah, I was curious about that too, because I just finished watching it again and I go, man, she died, but when you come back, it's like she learned from all that. Is that a different version of her? Because obviously she died earlier, or like you said, is it just like one little decision was made different in that multiverse or in that universe, and that we're actually watching kind of the same one that just made one slight different change?
That comes up too in the final scene between Evelyn and Joy, when Joy says to her, you could be, anyone you want. You can have any daughter you want. So it's like Jobu's inhabiting the body of present day Joy in that particular reality, because there's a couple different like very similar realities where there's the party, they're having the Chinese New Year party, and then they were late for their appointment, and then there's the other one where the appointment hasn't happened yet, obviously, because that's what happens at the end of the movie. But what's so freaking cool about it is, as a screenwriter, every single character is a clone of your protagonist and thereby of you, the screenwriter. So you're using each one of these characters to show and all the different perspectives and opposing perspectives to your protagonist, so the audience can then be compelled to make a decision with them. And they're doing it on all of these different characters and iterations of the same character in all these different places simultaneously, and then cutting it into one scene. That is mind-boggling, like how they did it, and it works emotionally, and all of them give you all the different emotions, like Evelyn and the auditor in the Hot Dog Fingers.
Jamie Lee's character is like Deidre or something.
Yeah, Deidre.
Yeah,
like their love affair in that universe is amazing. But then we see their companionship happen in the Chinese New Year universe.
Yeah.
Where they come together at the end of that too. And so all of these different stories are tying off together. And it's just, when I say those catharsis, that's one of the catharsis too. But I got so emotional. I was welled up. I was laying down watching the movie and I had to sit up because I was like breathing heavy and like eyes were getting watery.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of emotions going on in this. I want to know, like, favorite scene out of this massive movie. Do you have a particular scene that stands out to you or anything?
So my favorite is, not a lot of people would know this, but I'm going to freeze the frame and zoom it into it so everyone can see it. In the IRS building, if you look into one of the cubicles, you'll see Ryan Reynolds popping up inside.
No way, really?
No. But that's the reminder. Ryan Reynolds, please come on this show. Every
Yeah,
show, every episode, we ask him to come on the show, and he
Yeah.
has not yet.
Instead of just one scene, this movie won an editing Oscar for a reason.
Mhm.
And the whole second act, so first, second, third act, there's a pre-described format for screenwriting, and this film doesn't veer too far off of it, quite honestly. But what it does is it makes scene work, and these are scenes that have kind of a beginning, a middle, and an end that overlap each other, and then they cut back and forth to them, and then they build them up like exponentially. So as you're going, they're able to like show you bits and pieces from every scene. It's like an episode from 24 because it's literally all happening simultaneously.
Uh-huh.
So as they cut back and forth to these different occurrences, that has that emotional impact and the same compelling kind of like thought. And so it's exponentially, the stakes are getting higher and higher. And because you're familiar with all of the stakes from all of these characters, it just like compounds that way. Man, that's great. So I would say the last half of the second act, after the second act downturn, when everything starts going really shitty, that final scene in the parking lot between just the three of them, it's so simple.
Yeah.
It's so freaking simple.
What was your favorite scene?
I really loved the rock scene, man. It might sound
Yeah,
typical or whatnot, but I feel like from how much chaotic stuff was happening throughout this entire movie, it was a meaningful break. I don't know. That scene was emotional for me because I think you're going so hard this whole time, and then everything slows down and just kind of comes to a stop. And then there's this connection between mother and daughter just talking. Like, it's kind of nice to just have that breather. But also, there was a quote. Let me see if I can find it, which it says, every new discovery is just a reminder that we're all just small and stupid. And I just loved that whole like saying and scene because it kind of brings everything down to being like, everything isn't as stressful and important as we make it out to believe, but it is important. Like, it's important and unimportant at the same time because our decisions make up who we are, but it shouldn't like torture us, I would think, because we can always change whatever we want to do. And so I don't know, that was just my favorite scene. Like I said, gave you a breather, but also was very striking and impactful with like the desolateness of everything. So
interesting caveat about the rock scene. I was watching the Variety piece with the Daniels where they were both talking about it, and that was supposed to be a voiceover.
Mm-hmm.
And Michelle Yeoh talked him out of it. So she didn't record the voiceover because she was like, no, that's beautiful. It's like a Zen garden in the middle of the script.
Uh-huh.
And for exactly the same reasons you just said, and it's beautiful. And the joke works so good,
Yeah. I didn't even really pay attention to that there wasn't any voices. I just know it switches over to subtitles. And
and their character comes straight through in the subtitles too.
That's so crazy, man. Like, cause like I'm sitting there like listening to it in my head, I guess, as I'm reading it. I'm hearing her voice or Joy's voice, and then also Evelyn's voice talking to each other. It didn't even connect me. So that's man, another little thing to appreciate about that whole scene.
Their dialogue even worked to make it feel like their relationship was still going. Like the mom would joke about something, and then the kid would be like, "No, mom," and then the mom would say, "No, just joking." And so that little banter they had still worked between them in subtitles.
Yeah, see, you just made the whole scene even better for me, man. Like, just man, I can appreciate it even more.
I loved the when they were jumping scenes from one to the next, Joe Busci like cut her stomach open, and the very next scene is like those piñatas, and she's getting split open and spilling out from the abdomen. I just loved the beauty of how they tied all of those things together like that.
It's all a metaphor for the real world, and that's why, like in my mind, like this could be just an imagination, and from Joy's perspective of what this tumultuous relationship with her mother is. And all of these different worlds and machinations are just, this is how I'm experiencing this, the trauma of this relationship this way.
Yeah.
So when you see stuff like that, it is metaphorical for it, and it all works in the same direction, even though they're living different realities in different dimensions. They're all working towards the same goal together, each story.
I feel like that, you were talking about the trauma and all that, and there's so many themes and lessons to be learned from this movie. Which one do you think was most important, or at least to you, not to the movie, but to you?
You're talking about like the topics within this movie. What?
Yeah, within the movie, like to me, it was the importance of communication with your loved ones and how you're never really going to be truly happy unless you are honestly expressing to everyone around you what you need, what you're feeling, what you're wanting, what you're,
What I got most out of the movie is just you got to like accept people for who they are, and you really got to love yourself and show compassion to yourself. And I've said this before that I had to learn this lesson, and because I used to try to control everything and I was so angry all the time. It never got me anywhere good. It just only made my life more miserable. It's like misery brought on more misery, and that happens so much in this movie with Jobu, looking at like, it doesn't matter. She's so far into this depression. It doesn't matter what universe it is. None of it matters at all. So for me personally, I learned that I have to work on myself. And if I work on myself and if I can love myself, I can love someone else, and I can only give as much as I give to myself. So if I treat myself like all I can give, and if I treat myself great, I can treat someone else great, or I can at least treat them good. And, but you can't give more than you give to yourself. And I feel like that's what this movie really shows as well. So that was one of the story lines that I picked up on it. And that's just how I connected with this movie.
Okay, you're wrong, but let's hear what Rick said.
Fellas, there's so much to unpack, I mean, there's so much to unpack. I'm on board with both of you, what you said, like if nothing matters, then really the only thing that does matter is what you do. And that's demonstrated here by every one of the characters. If nothing does matter, even Joy or Jobu, exhibits that and has that reversal kind of that arc. But another thing that's prevalent in this film is mental health issues, the trauma that goes on between a mother and a daughter, between a husband and a wife, between a daughter and a father. Those obstacles to communication, those barriers to communication are very relatable to me. And I'm guaranteeing you to the majority of people watching. There's some people who it's not going to land on until a second or third time they watch it. But there are mental health cues here that are completely relatable and meaningful. The takeaway for me is family sticks together without regard to the relationships, whether they're broken or working. Family sticks together. So mental health is prevalent and will always be prevalent, but it doesn't matter because there's no place else I'd rather be than here with you. That's what stuck out to me. When she said that, I was like, that hit me, probably for personal reasons and other reasons, but that hit me.
Yeah, I think they showed that really well, like at the end of the movie when Jobu really wanted Evelyn to be in the same position she was in. She wanted her to see like the worthlessness of everything, and she actually did. She pulled Evelyn into that, and Evelyn was consumed by like, none of this matters. And every one of those universes started suffering because of her misery. So like, I think you mentioned this earlier. It's like, this is almost maybe just her own mindset through this entire thing. So she's in a miserable state. So everything else around her is miserable. But when she finally switched in the end, started like, gave people what they wanted, sprayed the perfume in the dude's face because he said that reminded him of his wife, and like spanked the dude with the ball gag in his mouth.
Daniel Scheinert, by the way, that was one of the directors.
Yeah, good fact there, man. You caught that one.
I did
you
not
notice
catch that.
Yeah,
no.
That's one of the directors. Of course, that's what he writes himself in as,
Yeah. And
write what you know.
So when she
write what you know.
Yeah. So when she finally switched it over and started doing good for people and treating herself good, all those other universes started coming together. And I noticed that too when myself, like I said, with the anger issues and all that, I started noticing the other angry people that react how I used to. And then you go, man, none of that really is like, none of that's necessary. Like I used to get so angry over the smallest thing, and then you can see it in someone else. You're like, man, I really hope that they can find themselves. And I feel like Evelyn found herself in that, and then also started bringing back joy in the
and
thing of just being in
Wayman
the moment. Yeah.
She was able to renew her romance and her appreciation for Wayman, because what she realized is he was always fighting. She thought he lacked ambition, thought he was slow, thought he was a goof. But he said, this is how I fight.
Uh-huh.
And that's
Yeah.
why she started doing that on the stairs, because she
Yeah.
says, I'm going to fight like you.
Yeah.
And then she starts going up and beating them with kindness, you know?
And life was so much smoother.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those that you can watch so many times and always pick up something. Like this time, I picked up at the end of the movie when they're sitting there kind of doing all their taxes, and like it's not just her. Now her whole family is there.
Right.
And if you notice, the googly eyes, there was only one set of googly eyes in the first scene in the beginning. But in the last scene, there's 4 sets of googly eyes representing the 4 of them that were helping out doing the taxes.
Yeah. Brought everybody together with the googly eyes.
Also, Joy wasn't with them at the IRS in the beginning. And then she was with them there at the end. So the whole family was there together.
Oh, yeah. Because she was supposed to be there. And they said, oh, well, she couldn't make it or something.
Yeah.
Right?
And then Becky dropped him off. And on the way inside, Evelyn tells Becky, she said something to Becky.
She's like, you got to grow your hair out.
Yeah. Becky was all happy. Becky, you know, and hats off to the actor who played Becky. Joy and Becky, you know, Joy did an amazing job. I forget her name, Stephanie. I can't remember her name, but she did an amazing job in this role.
Yeah.
Like it's very nuanced and subtlety to the comedy, but also, you know, big parts. And she's probably like in the shadow of everyone else right now.
After watching this, man, I almost feel like she should actually took Best Supporting Actress on this, because she's so big in the part,
so big,
and has so many little dynamics for her. Like, so I was like, man, she probably should have took it, in my opinion, after watching it again. Jamie Lee Curtis did an amazing job still too, but
it's Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah.
I should have qualified all this beforehand by saying that, you know, I don't really recognize the Oscars as like a valid adjudicator of merit, you know, because there's so much politics involved. But
no, for sure.
But what this conversation that we're having right now is important, because the supporting actress, you know, versus those 2 roles, like what were their importance to it? And they were both equally important. Like the lines that were written for them far surpass anybody's ability, you know, to make something good happen by themselves. You know, the lines have to be good. And Stephanie did a fantastic job making those lines good. Becky, there's a couple lines that she had that she stole the scene. The one that sticks out is when she meets Gong Gong, and right after Gong Gong has been told that she's Joy's girlfriend. So it's those 2 left alone, this total awkward moment, and Gong Gong says girlfriend in Mandarin or whatever. And Becky's response to that was so genuine and cute, and was like very, very good. Like, how do you sell a moment? Like every second of airtime on the screen, you know, and she killed it. Like every moment she had was good. Every character is a real character. It's not just a 2-dimensional thing, you know. It's like everything was made real, and that's like directing championship. These 2 guys, for being like cherries like they seem to have like a mastery of the craft.
Yeah. You know? There's so many different pieces going on this, and they somehow brought it all together into one nice piece and made it all make sense, but also made each universe kind of complement each other in some way. And I loved how they tied in universes and made it work for those things. Like, I'm going to go with fight scenes here, and I'm going to ask you guys what your favorite fight scene is, because there's so many that are going on. But my favorite one is how they tied in the pizza spinning sign, where she's using the shield, but she channels into the pizza sign flipper, and like all those moves she's using with that shield are just like bam, like fancy sign flipper stuff. And I just started noticing how each fight scene really tied in really well to whatever universe they did, whether that's, you know, the sign flipping scene or, you know, like the Benihana's type cooking stuff.
Ratatouille roll. Well, before we list all that, we should just remind everybody who's listening home, if anybody hasn't watched it, one of the ways that Evelyn gets her powers is she has to do something completely random, and these earpieces that she gets, in order to charge them up, she has to do this random thing. The earpiece gets charged up, she hits it, and then she's able to jump into another dimension. She goes into that dimension, learns a new craft, skill, or martial art, and then comes back and is able to apply it almost instantly. But I say this because to get into these worlds, you have to do this absolutely absurd thing, you know? Like one time she wets herself. She's talking to Joy and she goes, "Oh, nice, you wet yourself." But that's what she needed to do in order to charge up her thing so she could jump into another dimension. But then there's this one scene where Jobu calls all of these jumpers, right? And it's before the big fight scene. She calls them in and tells them what's going on, gives them their mission brief. And then she goes, set up your launch pads. I think that's what it's called. So all of them start doing this crazy stuff. One guy's like sitting on a coffee machine with his pants down. Like
I know what you're talking about. Exactly.
The other ones are dancing like idiots.
One dude's licking a pillar. Like,
and it shouldn't be taken seriously. But when you watch it, you're like, oh, okay, they're doing it, and so it like makes sense. And it's like
weird that it makes sense.
Anyway, I had to say that. I had to get that out of the way because that's how all these like kung fu fights happen. Because like in the Matrix, where you get plugged in and you learn like the skill, they're able to do all this stuff in these different words. But I'll say my favorite is though. That being said, actually comes from Alpha Wayman when he's got his fanny pack and he does the fights. He like fights everybody off his fanny pack. Like, are you kidding me? He does this one thing where he takes his bag off, spins around, hits a dude, and then he throws it up and then kicks it kung fu style, like right towards the camera. And he does all these complex moves to do it before he gets to that piece. And it all just works out perfectly.
Fun fact though on that, he actually got that. They were limited on time that they could shoot it. He got that whole thing done on the second take.
Yeah, wow. He used to be a stunt coordinator too, I think. So he had some previous experience.
My favorite is actually similar to the fanny pack scene. Like my actually favorite fight scene was the Chihuahua, where she's just like flinging this Chihuahua around. It's ridiculous, just as much so like the fanny pack, but you know, that's just the movie. It's just ridiculous.
I can see how those are similar, but yeah, I didn't even remember that scene until I watched it again today. And I was like, man, this is like kind of absurd and crazy. It gets like launched into the refrigerator and like the door shut really quick. And I think she kicks it at one point, kind of like how the fanny pack was kicked. I'm like,
she's like,
she
I'm
just
sorry.
Kicked her dog. So crazy. What I need to know though is, how does shoving a butt plug trophy in your ass like help you fight? Like, what happened in those people's lives that like in that
all I know
universe?
Is I'm a way better fighter when I have it in there.
Right.
So, and again, a great time to reiterate that this film won 7 Oscars.
Yeah.
In fact, the part where Joy beats the cop with 2 dildos, you know, she's holding 2 bloody like floppy dildos that she just beat a cop with. I mean, come on, man.
But speaking of dildo fights, there's a best dildo fight in a movie, period. Not this one. It's a movie called Deathgasm, and you should watch it if you want to see some really absurd, brutal dildo fights that end up with people or zombie like demons.
Is that
dying.
right next to Bad Milo at the video store? Now, kids, video stores are places where people like us would go on a Friday night to rent movies.
Another thing about this film is it looks gritty. It looks gritty and real, and they have a different look for almost, I think, every dimension. Like color.
Well, they have a different aspect ratio as well.
Aspect ratio, different lensing, different camera types they're using for all these different worlds. But this is employing like new cinematography and techniques that you see in like Deakins films or you know, another like big DP. So it has a big movie feel to it, you know, instead of a cheesy comedy.
I think they only had like $22 million to make this film or something.
I think it was less than that. I think it was only 14.
Between 14 and 22 million. So it's really cool to see something like this, like an independent film in a way, or a smaller budget film actually succeed, and not only succeed, but like kill it in that whole political spectrum, which I think was pretty well deserved.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So what about rating? We got every episode we have a obscure random rating, and I feel it's only fitting how much of sprinkling of everything is going on this bagel.
How much of
bagels?
everything? Well, I've already gone on a limb and said that this is my new favorite science fiction movie. And it's been the most joy I've got from a movie going experience. I'll give it 5 everythings, 5 everywheres, and I'll give it 5 all the time.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, there we go. That's it. All right. Austin?
I'm going to go 13 everythings, 7 everywheres, and 62 all at once, or all the times.
I'm going.
I'm giving Sean Marcus some work here.
13 all at onces. I'm going backwards in this multiverse. And we got 7 everythings. No, everywheres and 10 everywheres. Everything's.
Well,
See, I'm so confused. This is the
Man.
most confusing rating system we've ever had.
Just like it was
and
probably
it's
the
on
most.
record. So you guys have been recorded saying it. So
Like I said, it's probably one of the most confusing movies I first saw, and then the second time, it all made sense. So before we check out here, Rick, is there anything you're doing, any projects, any businesses that you want to plug? I know you said you didn't really want to.
2 things. Message to everyone. You know, you can read 100 memes every day on Facebook, and sometimes people will say something to you and you don't listen to them, you know? But from this movie, when Wayman says, you know, be kind, like just be kind in everything you do. So I'd love to plug that. I think that's true. You know, give people a little more patience. Give them a few more seconds than you normally would. Be kind. And, you know, conflict is a choice. Don't have to have conflict if we don't want it. I like making movies, for example, because it's, you know, solving complex problems with stimulating people.
Mm-hmm.
So that I took from this movie too, and I loved it. But if we're talking about plugging, I don't know if you guys can see this, but up here behind me on the wall there, that's the cover poster for the movie The River, a documentary film as made by Cinedigm, our production company. That's my first feature-length documentary, and it's available on Amazon. And
awesome,
as a storyteller, it'd be cool to share that with you. It's more of a journalistic thing than a filmmaking thing. But yeah, check it out.
I do like that you said just be kind to everybody in the end of everything. Using your little pitch here to just promote great like advice that you learned from the movie. You didn't really learn it from the movie, but you know, adding on that we need to be kind to each other. I love
actually, I'm going to say right there, Rick is, before this movie, was a total
I'm a changed man now.
Thanks look at it, full circle. It's just like Everything Everywhere All at Once.
The
asshole
changed
in the beginning,
changed
man in the end, just promoting kindness and love. But I want to thank you, Rick, for coming on the show. It's been awesome.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
If you guys got any entertainment out of this, any value, think about subscribing or like
even this much,
you know, give us some little comments if you want. We appreciate it, but only if you feel like you got some value out of it. Until next time.
Until next time. Cheers.
See ya.